All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining Workshop Wednesday. I am Brenda Slayton with Consumers Title, and today we are covering quite a variety of topics and that really impact every property owner and every real estate transaction. So most of us don't really think about the recorder's office until we have to record a deed, or unfortunately, there are some fraudulent things going on our own property. But today, I'm excited to welcome Donny LeCue with the Ventura County Clerk Recorder's Office. And today we're going to be discussing things like the recording process and how that works, common misconceptions, property and deed fraud, vacant land scams, which Kyle and I know a lot about those, fraud prevention resources available to homeowners, and what the future may hold as technology and AI continue to evolve. So before I introduce Donny, I wanted to introduce, so you guys can put a face to a name, I wanted to introduce my title officer at Consumers, Kyle Johnson. Thank you, Kyle, for being here.
You're absolutely welcome. It's nice to see everybody. And just to echo what you said, we are very fortunate to have such an incredible recording team in Ventura County. Consumers Title is licensed in all counties throughout the entire state of California. And it may be biased because I live in Ventura County, but I absolutely love working with the Ventura County Recorder's Office. They respond immediately, are very clear with instructions regarding recording, rejections, pulls. They're easily able to get a hold of either by email or by phone. And so I'm super excited to have them here today.
Thank you so much. And please feel free, Kyle. I know we deal with a lot of things and fraud issues and all that. So please feel free to chime in whenever you would like.
You got it.
um,
Will do.
all right. Well, without further ado, Donny, thank you so much for being here. I really, really appreciate you taking the time. I know how busy you are, so thank you.
Of course.
So I have a variety of questions that I would like to ask, and then I also kind of reached out to some agents, and so these questions are kind of a variety of things from myself and some other agents. So first, maybe you could just give me some basic, like for those that might not be that familiar with the recorder's office and what your office does and why it's so important.
Sure. Well, overall, we're an agency with three different divisions. So aside from the recorder's office, we're also the county clerk and the registrar. So we run the elections for the county as well. So a pretty big agency overall. But on the recording side of things, you're probably mostly familiar with what we do, but we are archivists. My background originally was in records management in the private sector. Then I was in real estate for a while, so I kind of got to combine those two things and work here. So primarily what we do is put the records that drive your industry into our archives and make sure that those are accessible for people.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's get right into fraud, because I know that, when Kyle and I have our classes on fraud, it is a big topic and a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. So maybe you can talk a little bit about all the different fraud. I know you and I spoke a little bit about the vacant land fraud, rental fraud, and maybe you can kind of give us a quick overview of the different kinds of fraud, what you're seeing the most and all that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to say I'm glad that you've had discussions about it. I think it's a really interesting way in kind of how your field is evolving. Obviously, real estate fraud on a national level has increased quite a bit just because of real estate values going up. So more money to steal basically means more fraud. But I think that's something that not a lot of people realize when they're working with real estate agents, title companies, mortgage officers. A large part of what you're doing for them is making sure that that transaction is safe. I remember my grandmother calling me a few years ago because she wanted to invest in some properties and she was a cash buyer. she asked me if she should get a real estate agent. I said, absolutely, because she's in another state. I want to make sure she's taken care of. But obviously, we always recommend that. And a lot of people who are taken advantage of with these scams, it's because they do, skip the process of having an agent, going through title, even having a notary, those basic safeguards that we recommend. So, I appreciate all that you do in the industry. Of course, there's only so much we can do when a document meets recording requirements. So I think someone like you that's actually kind of eyes on the transaction, it might even be more obvious when something fishy is going on. So a great idea to kind of know what types of scams are out there. And it seems like something new pops up every day. So I certainly can't cover them all. But a couple, common ones to be aware of. I know you mentioned vacant land fraud and real estate fraud. Important thing to note about those is they're very similar. In both cases, it's somebody posing as the property owner. And that's a lot easier to do with either a vacant home or a vacant land. So, they might find a vacant piece of land and they market it as a vacant lot for sale. They might even meet a potential buyer there. And obviously, what they're hoping for is that cash buyer who wants to move quickly. And, when the fraudster suggests that there's no need to use title or an agent and they have their own notary, those are all red flags to you, that you would probably spot. And I know, but, in some cases they forgo those processes and they might end up wiring $500,000 for this vacant lot to somebody only to find out that that person doesn't own the property, has no idea, who the owner is or no relationship with them. And we see the same thing with rental scams. And I think looking at the cases that the DA in Ventura County has prosecuted, I would say that may be kind of the most prevalent one. And that can be people that either scope out vacant homes and get access to the home, or even former tenants who hang on to a key. And then when they know the home is vacant, they show it. They promise a really great deal. If you give me a $5,000 deposit, I'll waive rent for the first 2 or 3 months. Sounds great, but then they give that money and that person disappears, never own the house. So those are kind of two common ones to be aware of, I guess, is just people posing as the owner. And the best thing we can do, and I think you can encourage your clients to do, is just verify who they are talking to. Go through title companies. Obviously, that's their job, is to make sure all of that is safe. But that's kind of the common ones that we're seeing these days.
Yeah, I know I had a friend a couple of weeks ago, and he was getting scammed big time. He had inherited this land from his parents. His parents had since passed, and it was in Calabasas. Actually, I'm sorry, not Calabasas, Cabazon. And it was just this little piece of land, and he was just like, I just want to get rid of it. So these scammers were good. And he was just like, I don't even care. He goes, they don't want title and escrow. They don't want this. And I was just like, and so I was really, really, I probably had to talk to him 3 or 4 times because these guys were really good and they were convincing him that, it was fine and they'd give him the money and all. And anyway, it was kind of crazy, but I think it's happening a lot on, Kyle, you're seeing that a lot too, right? On your end.
Yeah, obviously we're not involved when they try to bypass title and escrow and do like a private party transfer of vacant land. But what we have been seeing an incredible uprise of is impersonation. So fraudulent identification documents, from driver's licenses to passports, even as far as fraudulent notary stamps from embassy and consulates. So it's our policy at Consumers Title Company. Anytime we're dealing with vacant land sales, we require escrow to facilitate the notary of those documents. They can't be out of state. We don't allow electronic notarizations like Ron notaries. We want them to appear in person with our escrow and sign in person. So yeah, we take steps to prevent that. Last year, in 2025, we stopped 32 fraudulent real estate transactions. More than half of those were vacant land transactions. And like you said, not only the rise of property values, but the rise in technology and access to technology, especially with AI, as far as how easy it is to do seller impersonations, is quickly evolving. And these fraudulent rings are large, and they're organized, and they're sophisticated, and they're global. So yeah, we're always diligent about it. But one thing I just wanted to reconfirm so that people are really clear on this. It is not the county recorder's office's job to police recordings. It's not their job to police the grantor or the grantee, and if they're the person on title, and if the APN is correct, and if the legal description is correct, as long as that document meets recording standards, it's properly executed and notarized. The county will record it. It's not their job. So that's why the involving a title insurance company is so essential, is that that is what our job is, to validate the identification of our sellers, buyers, that the documents not only meet recording standards, but also that they appropriately reflect the property being conveyed in the transaction.
I think that, Robin, did that just answer your question? She was asking deed of trust being recorded for elderly people. Do you check and verify the elderly person provided permission? So, okay. Perfect. Thank you, Kyle. I mean, in regards to Robin's question a little bit too, is, you know, the demographic that is being targeted. So, Donnie, are you seeing one demographic getting targeted over another?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know if I've seen actual statistics on demographics of victims, but I think we always make that assumption is try to look out for those that are most susceptible to fraud. You know, those who are elderly, those who English may not be their first language, are often people that we see victimized. So we do, you know, we do have our fraud notification letter program, kind of um, to Robin's question. When you were the TOD, are you talking about a transfer of death, or is that a because I wanted to speak to that document. That is one that, okay, perfect. So yeah, I mean that's kind of a common scam too, is, you know, you have an elderly person who has a property, and a lot of times it may even be a relative who creates a fraudulent transfer on death, you know, basically saying, hey, when grandma passes away, I don't want the property to be split between the family, I want it going to me. So you know, the question was, do we verify that they provided permission? And the short answer is that the county recorder doesn't have the authority to verify that permission. So we couldn't if we wanted to. You know, we get that question too. Hey, can I put a stop to recording? So if somebody tries to record something on my property, can you not record it until you call me and make sure I give permission? We don't have the legal authority to do that. The law says, kind of to what Kyle was saying, if a document's brought to us and it does meet the recording requirements, then we don't have the authority to even get permission to who may be like the record owner of the property. But what we do for the transfer on death, you know, we do have our recording notification program where we mail out letters to constituents whenever certain documents are recorded against their property. The transfer on death deed is one of those specific documents. So while we can't ask permission, what we would do is if there was an elderly person, let's say they had a home and somebody created a fraudulent transfer on death, they would get a letter from us in a couple days saying, hey, here's the first page of a deed that was recorded. We want to make sure you're aware of this. And if you're not aware of this, you can contact us. So while we're not able to get their permission or maybe prevent the recording up front, we do make those efforts to notify them as soon as possible so that we, or more likely the DA, could help them out if they are victimized.
To go off of that too, Robin, from a title insurance perspective, anytime that we see a transfer on death deed being recorded, first of all, probate code has changed and evolved so much on these that you know, that there's so many things to adhere to that most of them that were recorded 5+ years ago are no longer valid. But anytime there's a transfer on death deed recorded pretty shortly before somebody passes, it's our job in title to validate when it was recorded, the purpose of why it's recorded, potentially look at that death certificate, and if there's any evidence that supports cognitive decline or Alzheimer's dementia on the death certificate, we would scrutinize that transfer on death deed pretty rigorously to make sure that the beneficiary that is trying to attempt to sell the property actually has the authority and there was no potential elder abuse involved in that scenario.
That's great.
Anybody have questions on that? Any further questions? Okay. So if somebody does record a fraudulent deed, how difficult is it to undo? Or What's that process look like?
It really depends on the circumstances. A lot of times a lot of times those are civil disputes more than they are criminal matters. So many times you could have I guess a common one we might see is you have a home that is in a family trust, and maybe you have two siblings that inherited that, and they're both acting as trustees. And maybe one of those trustees takes out a mortgage on the home, or maybe one of those trustees sells the home and takes the money without the other person's permission. So oftentimes we might get calls from the other party saying, hey, my sibling or family member, they didn't have my permission to do that. But in those cases, it would be a civil matter, and it would ultimately be up to the courts, how that is rectified. The only case in which we can ever remove something from our archives that's been recorded is by court order from a judge. So sometimes we'll get that. A judge will determine, hey, this should not have been recorded, and they'll give us a court order to remove that from the records. More often, what we'll see is there'll be a court order for there to be a new deed recorded, kind of rectifying that and putting it back into the name that it should be. So when it comes to actually, changing the title, oftentimes, I say it's not like stealing a car. You steal a car and you can take the car to another country and scrap it and get your money. You can't do that with a house. It's always going to be there. So if it's a dispute about, whose name is on the title and that's a civil matter, that can be rectified. The ones that I think really hurt people are more when it comes to equity scams, and when people end up giving money because they're promised a new mortgage or renting, or they're buying a property from somebody who doesn't actually own it. So it's really when people give money that it's difficult to get that money back. Oftentimes the scammers are not even in the country. So those are the really kind of more difficult ones to rectify, when it's getting the money back, even if you find out who the criminal is.
Thank you. So, I know you guys, it's already 11:20. I just want to let you know that I know I normally like to keep these 30 minutes. I'm just gonna, if you have to leave, you have to leave, but I definitely want to get some of these questions answered, because we're just hitting some of the other questions besides fraud, which I know is a big topic. So just wanted to give you guys a heads up on that. So let's switch a little bit and talk about AI and technology, and what technology is the recorder's office using to combat maybe that is correlated with fraud, and how do you see AI affect future recordings and all that?
Yeah, we're at a really interesting crossroads with AI. I mean, so is everybody in the private sector and government agencies. We're kind of, at this point where the reality is a lot of the tasks that people do can be replaced with AI. And, it is in many cases more accurate, and it is cheaper than employing people. And so, what we have to look at that, I guess, in a little bit different lens than maybe the private sector does. I mean, you are seeing with like tech companies mass layoffs and things as they're incorporating AI into processes that people used to manage. But the difference, thankfully, is that their bottom line is profit. So if you can replace people with computers and save money, they're probably going to do it to please the shareholders. Our bottom line is not profit. Our bottom line is service. So we're kind of looking at what is the outcome of however we incorporate AI. So AI has some really interesting uses in recording. I mean, specifically when it comes to recording requirements, there are several companies already that offer products that will essentially review documents. It knows all the California recording requirements and fees and everything, and it kind of does all that work that our people are currently doing with their eyes. Same with the indexing. It can use AI to go through the documents, and it knows the indexing rules for California, and it'll index all of those. So, those are traditionally jobs that we've had done by people. The recorder's office, why I find it so interesting is because our records never go away. So our archives go back to the 1850s. We still have every document that we started recording back then. So you can kind of see the evolution of recording. Our staff used to be scribes when everything was handwritten. And if you needed a copy of a deed, they'd say, come back in a couple days, and they'd sit in the corner and with their pretty cursive and make you a copy of the deed. Late 1800s, we saw typewriters. And then in 1940s, we saw photostats. 1960s, Xerox. Early 2000s, we went to electronic recording. And now we're in the AI stage. So this evolution and this new technology coming into the recorder's office that makes us stop and say, oh, the way that we've been doing things, there's a new way of doing that now that might be more accurate, more efficient. We're definitely at that crossroads, but a couple, cautionary things too. We want to make sure we are incorporating it responsibly. That first thing is, we're not interested in replacing people with computers, even if it's cheaper, because yeah, long term that might save you money up front, but people not having jobs in the community, and the county employs, I think, over 10,000 people in Ventura County. So, that's a consideration. It's great if computers are cheaper, but if nobody in the county has jobs, we're going to have more problems. But the other thing too is with institutional knowledge. We do a lot with legislation all year, every year. We're weighing in on legislation, and really understanding the impact of legislation depends on that institutional knowledge we have of recording requirements and standards, and same with indexing. So yes, we could replace that knowledge with AI and with computers, but we would sort of lose the value that we have to weigh in on that legislation that impacts people throughout the state. So kind of more what we're looking at is like, if you think of how doctors use AI when they look at MRI scans, the doctor is still looking at those scans and trying to find things, but they also use AI on those scans to catch anything that they may have missed. TSA does the same thing. They still have the agent looking at the screen, but they also have AI saying, hey, there's this weird thing in this suitcase. I don't know if you caught this. You might want to take a second look. And in those cases, those are great examples, I think, of where people aren't being replaced, but they are just being assisted by AI to do a more accurate job. So that's kind of what we're looking at right now is, if we are to incorporate AI into our processes, because we love the fact that it helps us to be more accurate in our work, but how can we kind of incorporate AI into these things as an assistant while protecting our institutional knowledge? And, there's ways to do that in the workflows, which is essentially we still have people look at the documents, checking those requirements, but maybe also running it through AI to make sure the AI has the same results as the person prior to putting it on record. So a lot of benefits. It is something that we're looking into ways to incorporate, but also doing it carefully and safely to make sure that we are protecting jobs for the people that work for the county, and making sure that we don't lose that institutional knowledge.
Yeah, I was thinking, there used to be a time when you could just FaceTime someone or Zoom or whatever, to get to see their face and if that matched their ID and all that. But I'm wondering if that's going to be an issue too, right? Because you have all these AI videos that look exactly like that person. So I'm assuming they could create something like that. I don't know if that's really a county recorder's, you know, issue,
Well,
but
yeah, when it comes to, I think Kyle mentioned Ron. And when it comes to remote notarizations, I mean, that's essentially how, when it was designed, that's how it works. Is you have a video conference, and they have you move your camera around the room and everything, and do things to make sure that you're not being coerced, and but all of that, we also, we're not doing accepting the remote notarizations yet. There's legislation that's on the table, but the Secretary of State has to pass standards for us to adopt that method, and they have till 2030 to do that. So there is a law saying we can use it. We just have to wait for a step for the Secretary of State. But what's interesting is when those standards came out about remote notarization, AI really wasn't a thing. And so, when they created those standards or the infrastructure for that, they weren't thinking about that. They thought that you could do a video conference and clearly see whether it's actually that person. And you're absolutely right. With AI, that's no longer the case. So a lot of our uses for that are prescribed by the Secretary of State. So I think that's probably going to end up being more their battle than ours, but it certainly has changed things.
yeah, for sure. Um, 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 there's so many questions that I still want to ask you, but I have to limit my time here. What do you think agents can do to better protect their clients, or, if they're going to reach out to their either their farm or friends, family, what is your advice on how, what they can say to protect them?
Yeah, well, as I already mentioned, if they're doing any kind of transaction, make sure that they're working with a real estate agent, with a title company, with a legitimate mortgage officer. Who you're working with is a really big deal. They can prevent you from getting scammed by others, and obviously, you don't want to be scammed by them directly. So that's a big thing, is knowing who you're working with, hiring the right people to represent you. Um, there are also, electronic recording notification programs. I know a lot of title companies, mortgage industries offer something like that. I'm not sure if Consumers Title does, but do you have something like that people can sign up for?
As far as like a notification program,
Yeah.
there's not. There's a few products out there like Title Lock and other things like that. We have found the efficacy of those to not be good enough to back by our company name or refer out to people. Either by how accurate the notification system is. A lot of the times, people were getting alerts on products like this with simple things like their community did an amendment to their CC&Rs and something that affects an underlying parcel or an assignment of an oil and gas lease for like a very, very large underlying parcel and sending people sort of into panic that we just didn't find the efficacy of it enough to recommend any of those type of products to anybody.
We had the exact same experience. We tried to adopt it too, and the administrative costs of supporting the program were much higher than expected. It's based on name. So
Yes.
if your name is John Smith, you're getting hundreds of notifications potentially every week of things that are recorded in your name that don't actually have to do with you. So yes, there are errors in those programs. That said, there are those programs in the private industry that are offered. We also do send out, our mailed letters when things are recorded on properties. People don't have to opt into that. That's something we do if you own property in Ventura County. We're expanding those letters from right now, we're doing about 4,000 a year, but we're adding a lot of document types to that. And by January 1st, we'll be sending over 40,000 a year. So we're already doing that for people. They get that letter in the mail when there's something recorded, and that's based on their property, not just their name. So it's actually going to the right person. We also, one of the biggest things you can do is just search your records regularly. Big part of our job is making sure that the public has access to the records. And if you go on our website under the official record search, people should go in just like you look at your credit every 3 to 6 months or whatever. People should do the same thing with their real estate records. So, for your clients, family members, make sure that they know how to log on to our website and look up their name. If they see any recordings in there they don't recognize, they can reach out to us and we can kind of help them identify whether or not that is fishy. And other than that, just looking out for those red flags. There's an endless amount of red flags, but having people in the industry like you and me who kind of have seen the scams out there and know how things should work versus how somebody posing as a seller might present them really helps out too. So knowing what's recorded against your property is the biggest thing, whether that's a notification program or by searching your own records.
My recommendation to agents, guys, is you do your 12-month follow-up with clients that you've sold or helped them purchase properties. It's a pretty common practice with real estate agents. Hey, a year later, I'm going to do a follow-up, or every 6 months, I'll do a follow-up. Give me a call first. It's very simple for me to take a quick look at the chain of title and let you know, are there property taxes paid, unpaid? Has anything recorded against the property that would be alarming to notify? And that way, when you call them and do your follow up, there's a really big value add there. One of the common occurrences that I've seen with agents doing this is helping them avoid probate. Since they've purchased the property in their trust, they went through a refinance, pulled the title out of the trust, and the title company never put it back in. And we let them know that. They call the client, hey, I'm following up with you. It's been 12 months since you bought the property. Wanted to let you know when you did your refinance 6 months ago, you never put the property back into the trust. Is that something you would like us and escrow to help you facilitate? So there's a really good value add. It helps them protect the property. It keeps them notified as to what's on the chain of title, and a really good practice for agents. You just give me a call. It takes me 5 minutes to look into that for you, and I'm happy to do it.
I can always help with that too. And then also, I know there's some people, they just love to do things themselves and research. I mean, we like to take it off your plate if at all possible. We always want to do that because we know you guys are busy, but I do have access to a program and I can show you guys how to do that and access that information yourself if you would like. Kyle, since you're I have you right now. I wanted to ask you, I obviously know the question of this, but would title insurance protect a homeowner if a fraudulent deed were recorded against their property?
So any title insurance covers up to the date of close. So if you're a buyer on a real estate transaction, it is the title company's job to search public records, ask right questions, do investigatory process so that when you close that day, you are being given free and clear title to real property. What takes place after that date is not typically something that's covered by title insurance. So if you purchased a property today, June 24th, 2026, and next year someone fraudulently records a deed or fraudulently takes equity out of the property, unfortunately, that's not something that's covered underneath title insurance. It's not like most forms of insurance that is a continued coverage for new events happening post close or post issuance of policy. We are covering things like a previous owner wants to make a claim to title, or a previous creditor says we had a claim to being paid out on something. So post-close events is not something typically covered by title insurance.
Thank you. Thank you. Does anybody have questions that we didn't go over or you were curious about, or maybe you had a client had a fraud issue that you'd like to share your story? Anybody? Don't be shy. Um, okay, is there anything else, Kyle or Donnie, that we maybe Donnie, anything you wanted to talk about that we didn't address or I forgot to mention?
Nothing specific comes to mind, but just want to say thank you for all that you do, and appreciate the acknowledgement of what we do. Hopefully, we're serving you well, and we're happy to help. Obviously with recording, but with fraud issues, even though it's in the district attorney's office, we're very fortunate that in Ventura County they have a real estate fraud unit. That's not incredibly common with DA's offices throughout the state, so we kind of have that venue for direct assistance for people in the county who are victims. So, if you have anybody who, even if they spot a document that they're not 100% sure about, please feel free to refer them to us. We can at least look into that, and if we can't figure out, in some cases it's just a misunderstanding. They take out a mortgage and they see a deed of trust and they say, "Why do I have a new deed on my home? I didn't sell it." And we can kind of help straighten those out. But if things do look suspicious to us, we can refer them to the DA to help them out. So yeah, we appreciate you working together with us to help keep people safe.
Yeah, and all I'll say, I'll beat the drum all day long. Try to have access to someone like Donnie in a different county in the state of California and do a call like this with LA County Recorder's Office, Riverside County, Orange County, and it's not going to happen. The direct access that we have to our government entities out here in Ventura County is something very special, and their willingness to jump in and help is completely unique to this state. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. And I appreciate you being here. And thank you, Donnie, so much. Really appreciate you taking the time. I know you do a lot. I've seen your name out there in the community doing other real estate events. So thank you. I appreciate it. Just really quickly, you guys, want to let you know that next workshop Wednesday is July 29th, and I'm going to have Greg Burns with Investment Property Exchange on. He's amazing. He is going to talk about 1031 exchanges and how to turn one sale into two and how to create more business for you. So would love to have you guys join us for that. I will notify you guys a little bit later, but just wanted to have you put it on your calendar, July 29th at 11 a.m. And thank you guys all so much for choosing Consumers Title. We are so grateful for your support. And if you guys need anything at all from us, please don't hesitate to reach out. So thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Brenda.
Thank you.
Thanks, Donnie. Kyle.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.